Now, Mauryan Empire was the first pan-India great empire, Mauryan Empire. The name Mauryas, the name Mauryas is probably derived from Maurya clan. Based in Magad, we have to understand the political history from Chandragupta Maurya to the last king Brihadrat. Now, let me give you a rider. You don't have to remember the year of accession and decline, but definitely you have to remember what were the important developments which took place during each of the kings. And especially, you have to focus on Chandragupta Maurya and more than that on Ashok Raj. Ashok for his administrative outlook, Ashok for the development of Maurya's consolidation, and Ashok also for his unique spirit or his unique orientation towards managing affairs of administration without an element of warfare. So we have to understand Ashok and Buddhism. And the third aspect is administration, how they were interlinked, how Ashok was able to apply some of the Buddhist principles in his areas of administration. Speaking of administration, no discussion can happen without reference of Arthashastra, the book on statecraft by Kautilya or Chanakya. We also have to focus on the second source, Indica, which although has been lost, but the references of Indica in the later Greek texts by Arian. So Megasthenes, who was ambassador in the court of Chandragupta Maurya, sent by Seleucus Nicator, who was defeated by Chandragupta Maurya, and later they stitched their alliance in the form of matrimonial. Helena was married into the family, and Megasthenes' account, especially of Patliputra, though with its limitations, provides valuable insights into administration, in society, in economy, in municipal administration, in warfare, and also the overall personality of Chandragupta Maurya. So always when you start any chapter, you have to focus on the sources. So what are the sources which helps you to study a chapter? Then you will definitely be able to remember it better way. So with respect to Mauryan administration, in fact, with respect to Mauryas, we have Indica, we have Arthashastra, we have Ashokan pillars, and we also have Buddhist texts. Ashoka's Dhamma. So we have to first of all understand what is the meaning of Dhamma. Was it really or only imbibing and incorporating Buddhist Dhamma into matters of administration, or how it is different? So we have to make a comparative analysis between Ashoka's Dhamma, Buddha's Dhamma. Dhamma is a Prakrit word for dharma, and the dharma which is mentioned in Upanishads, Upanishadic dharma. So you have to definitely make do of all the aspects. We have to correlate all these aspects. Then we will be able to appreciate what is the concept of dharma. And when you read your world history, you will understand how the element of naturalism, which was one of the pillars of enlightenment, can be correlated to dharma. Now, society, we have to understand with the help of all the sources the development of society and factors responsible for the decline and disintegration. And after the decline of Mauryan Empire, we have to see what happened in Magad, what happened in North India, Central India, and also in parts of Deccan and South, because that was virtually the entire land. So apart from the extreme north, northeast, and extreme south, all of Indian subcontinent was under the Mauryas. So let us see again a question. Which among the following rulers advised through his inscription? So the moment you see that a person is advising or speaking through inscriptions, you can say that it was Ashok. So many a times you need an exact information, but you understand the perspective, the mindset, you can very easily get the right answer. Now talking about post-Mauryan era, post-Mauryan era was referred to by the British as a dark age. And when we talk about post-Mauryan era, we are talking from 300 BCE to 200 AD or CE. Let's use the correct terminology. These 500 years have been referred to by historians such as V.A. Smith as Dark Age. in ancient Indian history. But it was not a dark age. Why the British historians refer to them as dark age? Because they have this dynastic based approach for study of history, whether it is ancient, medieval. And apart from the major dynasties, they believe that all other time period was a period of fragmentation and decline. To some extent, this accusation, I would say, is right. But the post Mauryan era was also a dynamic period, a dynamic age in which India witnessed influx of people from outside. Indo-Greeks had come, foreign ruling dynasties came. Indo-Greeks, Bactrian Greeks, Shakas, Pahlavas, and then the Kushanas. And what is the beauty is that not only they came, they ruled over India, but they helped in establishing good connections, cultural, economic between India and Central Asia and even further west. More than that, speaking of Kushanas who adopted and patronized Buddhism, so we find that the patronage to Buddhism, which starts from 6th century BC, reaching a moral high, a materialistic high during Ashok, also receives a boost during this period. And Kushanas introduced, in fact, from the time of Shakas, we find the use of properly minted gold coins. This was the time when India was a major node of Central Asian silk trade. When India enjoyed a favorable balance of trade with respect to the Romans, hence, as Pliny writes in his book Natural History, India was a drain of world's gold. So, this period was definitely a very rich culture. And I would suggest that when you are reading this chapter, apart from the personalities, focus on the cultural, materialistic exchange which was happening between India and the West. So, how did India gain from the Western interaction? And how did the West gain from India's contact? So, this is very important in terms of coinage, in terms of philosophy. India also borrowed, they also borrowed. In terms of drama, sea navigation, astronomy. Again, the list is very long. The list is very long, and you have to understand all these aspects because a question can very easily be asked that how the 5 centuries post the decline of Mauryas, the great Mauryas, was a period of cultural exchange between India and the West. And then, immediately after the decline of Mauryas in the Magad region came the Shungas, who were champion of Brahmanism. And in fact, during the time of Pushyamitra Shunga, who assassinated the last Mauryan king Brihadrat, who was his military general. Pushyamitra Shunga was the military general, and while one fine morning Brihadrat was inspecting the army, he was backstabbed. So, the Buddhist texts write that the rise of Shungas was a dark period in which the Buddhist architecture was destroyed. So we have to understand that yes, this part of the story is partially true. But again, we find that the later Shunga kings, such as Agnimitra, they have patronized. In fact, we find a major addition to the Buddhist stupas in the form of the stone layering, in the form of sculpted Toran doors, and in the Deccan region, where we will be studying about the Satavahanas and Ikshvakus, we will be studying about Amravati School of Art. And not only this, the greatest contribution of Indo-Greeks was in terms of introduction of idol worship. And this idol worship was incorporated in Mahayana Buddhism. And from Mahayana Buddhism, it was incorporated into Jainism and even in Hinduism. So we have to understand all these elements in entirety. Besides this, the very important trade connections between India and the world. And why only West? Why not Southeast Asia? Why not India, China? So this period was definitely a dynamic age in which definitely the political model which had been developed from 6th century BC received a jolt. But again, we find that new arenas, new domains opening up. Let's see a UPSC question. Many of the Greeks, Kushans, Shakas embraced Buddhism rather than Hinduism. Now, this is an interesting question. Again, you see, if the nature of the question, it is more of concept based. So, the type of questions being asked in the recent times are such that if you have understood the essence of the chapter, if you have understood the essence of the flow of ancient Indian history, then even if you forget certain facts, you will be able to answer. So let us see. Buddhism was an ascendant at that time. That appears to be a strong reason, but not so. They had renounced the policy of war and violence, definitely not, because the Kushanas continued to wield a large army. Caste ridden Hinduism did not attract them. No, it is not that because of caste ridden, it is probably because Buddhism embraced or it was more open. In fact, we find that these Indo Greeks or Westerners were referred to as Yavanas by the Brahmanas. They were referred to as Yavanas by the Brahmanas, and the Brahmanas, in fact, the Brahmanical religion became more orthodox and conservative in response to in response to the, I would not say attack, but the threat from outsiders. They felt that if they very easily intermingle or if they are allowed access, it might defile the Brahmanical religion, which was, according to them, very sacred, very sacrosanct. So the answer is this. Again, without understanding the essence, you would never be able to, and you might probably be confused by a more palatable option A. Then we have the Guptas, the nationalist historians. The nationalist historians call the Gupta age as a golden age. We have to understand why it is called as a golden age. Why the Gupta age is known as a classical age in Sanskrit literature. Speaking of Sanskrit, we have to understand the journey of Sanskrit from a language based on oral traditions to a language which was used not only for religious writings but also for dramas, for various other works. So Sanskrit literature was in religion, it was in science, it was in drama. So multiple field. It was definitely also in terms of law books, smriti literature. So we'll start from here. We'll start from who were the Guptas, because the Gupta title appears to be that of Vaishya. And when you find that a ruler is probably from a Vaishya background, even today, people in parts of eastern UP and Bihar, they have Gupta as a title, referring to the Vaishya. Now, again, today we don't have any rigid classification, occupational classification, but the Guptas belong to that section. So we have to start from the origin and then we'll go to political history. In political history, again, you again don't have to remember the name of all the kings. You have to do with Chandragupta, the founder. Then we have Samudragupta, Skandagupta, Chandragupta II, and Kumargupta, mainly because of his role in the establishment of Nalanda University. The administration of Guptas, which was probably not as centralized. The geographical spread was also shrinking. Why it was shrinking, we have to understand. What was the economic limitations or inhibitions because of which the Gupta administration was on one hand a monarchy, but also we have elements of decentralization. What were the elements of decentralization? Why the Gupta monarchs were not as strong like the Mauryas? We have to do a comparative analysis. Because when you say that the Mauryas are centralized, then this is not an absolute term. You have to say that the Mauryas were a centralized economy, centralized administration with reference to the Guptas. And maybe again after Guptas we find further decentralization. So this is how you have to do the comparative study. Society, we'll find Fahen. Fahen talks about Chandalas. The economy, although it has a bright spot in the first phases, then there is an element of decline. Science and technology. Gupta is a golden age because we find tremendous development in science and technology. And then decline and disintegration. Guptas were also patrons of Nagara style of temple architecture. So we have to understand Guptas with reference to culture, society, economy, polity, how Hinduism, very important aspect. We are going to discuss how Hinduism came into being. So there is a lot of difference between Vedic Brahmanism that was there in Vedic age and Hinduism. What changes happened in the Brahmanical culture also. And when I say Brahmanical, I'm not talking about Brahmanas, I'm talking about the entire Vedic setup, what were the changes, what elements came up, and how why it is said that Hinduism is more a way of life. What is the meaning of this? So all this has to be understood. The nature of coinage, why there was decline of trade and commerce. So always we try to study a chapter not only in silo based approach but with having various linkages. And everything is linked. If you understand history from this point of view, again I say your task becomes much easier. Try to also focus on the works of Kalidas. The question can be asked on Kalidasa's literature. Let's see a question. Kulivap and Dronvap. Now, this is a difficult question. Let me tell you, this is a difficult question, which is both of them are units for measurement of land. So, something that is generally not referred to, but you will always find one or two outliers. Now, post Gupta period, this was a period of decline, political decentralization. In North India, who were the rulers, important rulers, or ruling dynasties? You need to have a rough idea. And we'll then focus on Pushya Bhutis, from where we have the great Harshavardhan, the last great king in the north. But the political structure of Harshavardhan, though a monarch, was very different from even the Guptas. The Pushya Bhutis or Harsha's reign was more like a confederate polity. You have to understand how it was a confederate polity. Now, the meaning of confederate polity, let me rest your all assumptions, was that he ruled through a system of alliance. So, if Harsha's directly ruled territory was this, and then there were allies, then actual influence of Harshvardhan. So, they accepted him as their great leader, but they were not subordinate. But one of the king was the leader. So his influence was over this vast territory. But after Harshvardhan, North India witnessed a complete political decentralization where we have a large number of small kingdoms. So Harshvardhan's southward march, again we have to study Pulkeshin, the Chalukyan king. We have to understand about Pulkeshin, how this has been referred to a whole inscription by Ravi Kirti. So inscription study is very important as a source of study. Harshvardhan's era was also a golden period if we go by the account of Huyen Sang. Who was Huyen Sang? His account. So we have a number of questions being asked from Chinese travelers, Arab travelers, foreign travelers have been asked in both prelims and in mains. And then finally we have the history of South India and Deccan. Definitely the history of South India, where we have lesser number of sources, probably because most of the earlier rulers were based, the political history of India was based in the Magad region and then it went to the Kannauj region. Also because the formation of large political states was delayed in South India. Now, there are a number of causes, but the main cause is that South India has lesser number of fertile tracts which could provide agricultural surplus, and this would be the basis of taxation and the rise of a prominent state. So, this was probably the reason. So, we have megalithic age, the age where we have the earliest evidence of knowledge of iron. Iron tools were used, but not in large number. And megalithic to age is known. Megalith means large stone. So they are known for their prominent stone burials. Then in the Sangam era, then in the post-Mauryan times, we have the Sangam era. Why it is known as Sangam era? Again, because of the Sangam texts in the Pandyan kingdom. So we have to correlate the earliest history of South India and the later political and the socio-economic history from the time of Pallavas. Sangam texts are very important. They have been asked. So you have to understand how the Sangam texts provide us with the earliest information of polity, economy, society. We have Cholas, Cheras, Pandya dynasties. So all this is mentioned, but in the Sangam text, all the Cholas, Cheras, and Pandyas are more like tribal chiefs. So when we will study about Raj and Rajendra, we'll be referring to them as imperial cholas. So here the polities which are referred in Sangam texts are more like tribal polities. The beginning of political history is from the time of Pallavas, who constructed temples culminating into Dravida temple. So understand the history from perspective of the overall composition. Because if you read only cultural history, you will not get a view of the mindset of the rulers. Why did people throng to the temple in large number? And then what was the basis of emergence of Tamil Bhakti movement, Nayanars and Alvars, and then the Bhakti movement in North India, and coming up of Sufism and enriching it. So all this is interlinked. We'll also study briefly about Kharvelas, Satavahanas, Vakatakas, Chalukya, Badami, and Kadambas, especially with respect to their cultural history. So, very meticulously, the course has been designed in a way so that you can prepare rough notes, and then with one reading, your entire subject is prepared. Let's see some question. With respect to the context of history of India, we have Taniyur villages referred to a single Brahmin or group of Brahmin. Ghatikas are colleges attached to a temple. Yes, this is right. Tanur are not. Here, reference is to Agrahara. It is Agrahara. It is Brahmade. In fact, it is Brahmade are those temples, those lands which are donated to a Brahman or group of Brahman. Agrahara is more like a tax-free village, tax-free Brahmanical village. So again, we have wrong. So you can see that by eliminating now, we already know that we have the revenue which is for the maintenance of the tank. That is wrong. It is not the revenue which is set up for the maintenance of the tank. So answer is 3 only. So if you see the trend of questions being asked from ancient Indian history, it has been going up in the last 3 years, and that is also those questions which are non-cultural questions. If you add it with the questions which come from history and cultural areas, you will get 6 to 7 questions. And if you prepare well, you will be able to answer 4 to 5. That means 10 marks, very important 10 marks, which can make or break your chances of writing the mains. Sources to refer: Ancient India Past, R.S. Sharma, Byju's study material, or you can just follow the tablet. So read less and understand more. That is the basic idea. After you have done a chapter, any chapter in ancient India, just ask the right questions. If you are having difficulty to frame the structure, pick up a board, a piece of paper, ask a question. Who were they? Where did they come from? How did they spread? Why are so powerful? What is their economy, polity, structure, social structure, belief system, culture, and then decline? Then when you move to the next chapter, you see how it was different from the earlier ones, why it became different. Then you will understand the linkage. What was the agency of change? In this way, if you are able to prepare an entire flow chart, then believe me, revision of ancient Indian history can happen within a matter of 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, at max 4 hours, and in 4 hours you are earning 10 questions. What more do you expect? Now, how to approach ancient Indian history? I've already said a lot. I'll just sum up. First of all, prepare a structure of the flow of syllabus, not event, the flow of syllabus. Already it is there in your PPT. Then you prepare each segment. In the segment, if you are starting, say, from Indus Valley, so what was before and what was after? Then you prepare every segment in terms of origin, geography, where they were located, how geography shaped their economy, political structure, social structure, economic structure, belief system, and culture. Prepare this. And then when you move to the next chapter and when you study all these, then definitely focus on why the change. For example, when we study about coinage, we find that the issuing of gold coins. The issuing of gold coins declined. The restrictions placed by the Romans on coins on trade with India banned. There were political issues such as the attacks, invasions from Central Asia, Hunas. So all these factors, why the change? And why only in economy, in religion also? So when I talk about Hinduism, when I talk about Vasudev, when I talk about Gopal, Krishna, Narayan, how did these different deities come under the common pantheon of Vishnu? Then how do we correlate the worship of people with Vishnu? Snake worship. All this has to be studied. And then you prepare a flow chart. You prepare a flow chart. So structure, then you prepare chapter by chapter and just write keywords. Don't write everything. Don't waste time in preparing notes. Write keywords. Polity, 3 lines, 3 words. What signify the polity? Important terminology, name of officials, very important. Next thing is important terminology. Already we are doing, but still I would say do it on your own. And then compare with our comprehensive list that we will do at the end of ancient India, medieval India, and also in our art and culture. Important terminologies. Do that. Finally, when you are done with this, start solving papers. Mock MCQs. If you get a new information, integrate in your notes. Now let me tell you something more. How you have to study. Watch the tablet first. Then books. Read one book. When you are done, come to this stage. Note making or synopsis. Don't prepare exhaustive notes because then a lot of time is being wasted. So do this. Then after your notes are done, recollect just by seeing this, whether you are able to recollect or not. If you are unable to recollect, go back to the book, that portion, whenever you are revising. So at the end of it, maybe the 10 to 12 pages that you have with information also updated from test series from previous years, UPSC questions. You'll have a very, very sound, I would say, strategy. And also you will save the bit of effort. So stop reading the book after 2 times. Don't do that because reading a book takes time. And why students ignore or leave ancient India, medieval India, or any other portion is because they don't have time to revise. And this also creates a sense of anxiety that whatever hard work I had invested in this subject, in this portion, has actually not capitalized in the last moments. So when you are able to revise a portion multiple times, believe me, even if you miss out one or two information, you feel confident. And prelims is about a confidence game. And when you prepare your syllabus, ancient history in this way, methodological way, and then finally after every segment, when you are done with art and culture, add a page of art and culture also, important synopsis. Then you see how preparing ancient history, culture, medieval history becomes very interesting. It will give you perspective to quote in your essay, to quote in your society, and also to revise it effectively and fetch right marks. I would not say much because if you are able to implement this, then definitely it is not going to be a challenge for you, even for those who have been introduced to ancient Indian history for the first time. But definitely never ignore any portion of UPSC because you don't know even a single question matters. Thank you.